We are back with part two. We are continuing this conversation. We had to stop last time, but thanks for hopping on again, Marcia. We're going to continue the conversation about stress. And in this part, we're going to talk more about the reasons why stress isn't always bad. I think it gets a really, it gets the rap that any sort of stress is always bad. And that's definitely not the case. So, Marcia, I'd love if you kick us off with some of your
Yeah.
thoughts.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here and talk about this. It's super relevant right now. I think a lot of us are starting to really pay attention to stressors in our life, what causes us stress, why stress is occurring, when we're in chronic patterns of it. Like a lot of on the one hand, I love social media because it's bringing a lot of the awareness to these more subtle conversations, like to the forefront. And then sometimes it gets really confusing out there to be like, well, am I supposed to be doing like, you know, 20 rounds of diaphragmatic breathing every day? No, like we don't all have to go there and do these things. So the thing that I have this really funny story with stress, to be honest with you. When I was, oh my gosh, I was in my mid 30s and I had been vegetarian for a while, not for any reason other than one day I was at my brother-in-law's house and they always were eating like large pieces of meat were like thrown down and like being sliced. And there was something about it that day watching him slice it, it made me like feel sick. So I was like, that's it, I gotta take a break from meat for a while. But this was causing me stress. It was stressing out my system. And I didn't know this. And I was feeling really tired and I was feeling like agitated. And I was starting to have some like aches and pains in my body. And I went to this gentleman. Oh my gosh, I wish he was still in the area. Dr. Luke. He was amazing. He was a chiropractor, kinesiologist, nutritionist, as many of them are. And he looked at me and he said, "What's causing you stress?" And I was like, "I'm not stressed." And I literally had this like reaction to him suggesting that I was stressed because really like there wasn't much going on in my life at the time. But then as we started talking, he was like, "Oh, go eat a burger. Like, I think you need meat." He's like, "I think this is what's causing you stress." And so the thing that I really, and again, at the time, I took a lot of offense to it because I didn't understand stress because you know, and I think people still do say this to this day, but like, "Oh, you're so stressed out," or "I'm stressed out." And it's this very negative, like, "Oh, I'm so stressed," versus like, no, you're not stressed. You're experiencing stress. Stress is showing up for you to try to show you something. And I just, I share that story a lot and I kind of chuckle at myself because in my I was like a yoga teacher. I had a very peaceful, calm life at the time. Like I didn't have a ton going on, but that I was like, I felt like that made me stressed. But then I understood I had stress and I wasn't in that much communication with my body at the time. Even though I had been practicing yoga for a while, I wasn't like in it. I wasn't really understanding the signs and the signals. I didn't understand that the pain in my low back was because my muscles were weak, because I wasn't giving them enough protein. I wasn't sleeping well, right? Like I was essentially malnourished. That diet wasn't great for me personally. And the moment I started eating meat again, it's like everything came back into alignment for me. And now remember, we're talking about like acute stress, and feeling stress in the body is a signal that you got to take, like, it's asking you to like pay attention to something, right? And there's also applied stress to your body that is actually really good. And we talk about this in yoga a lot. Like yin yoga is this practice of holding for long periods of time. And when I say long periods, like 3 to 5 minutes, all around, it's about stressing the connective tissue in the joints because we need some healthy stress on those tissues and the tendons, and so that they strengthen and support our system. And a lot of times when we say, oh, like we want to apply some stress on the joints, people are like, oh no, we don't. Yes, we do. We do. That's how we keep them healthy. So it's interesting. Stress gets a little bit of a bad rap sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, the thing that I think about is like having nervous system resilience within
Mhm.
your nervous system to be able to go into these heightened places of very high stress, but then being able to come back to your baseline and get back to the parasympathetic
Mhm.
calm type state. The issues that come up with stress is when we are living in like this constant
Chronic. Mhm.
chronic, yes, low grade level of stress, which unfortunately a lot of us just with how modern day is, it's like you're always thinking about that email or, whatever
Mhm.
it is kind of like in the back of your mind. And it's just kind of, it can build. And sometimes I think it can go like unnoticed. Like we're like, dang, how did this
Oh,
creep up?
yeah. So, fascia, the connective tissue in the body, holds on to like the stories of our whole entire life. So, when I think about my health journey of the past couple of years, I really had to recognize that I had to kind of cocoon myself for a while I was healing some pretty significant digestional gastrointestinal infections that modern medicine couldn't see, modern medicine couldn't help, and they were actually quite unique and challenging to move through. But I had to keep my stress levels at bay, like significantly. Like I'm almost it's really kind of funny. I was thinking about this the other day. I have such a strong bedtime and morning routine. I almost I almost kind of now need to kind of start getting myself like popped out of them because they're almost a little bit too comfortable and keeping. But anyway, that's a whole other story. But one of the things that popped up for me during that time was this reflection on how the years leading up to getting sick, it's usually like the year to 2 years before your body kind of does whatever it does to slow you down. That's the period of time that you need to look back on and go, okay, what's been the stress? What's been the chronic? What started the cycle? And that's when you find the secret to your healing, truly. It's not necessarily something that happened when we were 10 years old, or I know you're much younger than I am, so I'm going to say 20 years old, 30 years old. For those of us who are listening who are maybe more my age, like it's a lot of times what we're dealing with right now in this moment, if it's like something that's causing you any kind of, we were talking about sleep disturbances, digestive disturbances, skin health issues, weight gain, all the things that have stress, brain fog, like the inability to make clear decisions, all this stuff, you can typically track back just like a couple years and figure out where it started. And then that it became this chronic thing that you're right. It's on the low key, the subconscious just worry, thinking about it. You'd probably dream about it. You might be talking about it a lot. I recently have been, as I was sharing with you, been doing a lot of somatic, one-on-one somatic work with people, customizing somatic programs for them, because that's how we really start to release, I'm going to call it trauma, right? Trauma is another word that people oftentimes forget. It doesn't have to be all trauma is trauma. I'll just put it to you that way, right? And it's all significant because everybody's body is going to process it. Any threat is a threat to the system.
Yeah.
Our adrenal glands don't know how to distinguish, bear from person, cutting you off in traffic. Like it does, it's, like it, so it's like it's trauma that gets then stored in the body. And I have two practices that I really love sharing with people: restorative yoga and then the somatic practices, because that's how we get back into this place of being able to tap into it. tap into the parasympathetic nervous system. To your point, our whole, like, you step outside your house and it's stress because of the car noise, the air pollution, noise pollution, just you name it.
Yeah, and I think a lot of what we're talking about comes back to this principle that like you have power over your stress levels. Like sometimes not, always, but stress is perceived. Most of the time it's perceived. Okay, being chased by a bear, that's one thing, right? But we can get to choose, what, like, let's say I'm working with a high schooler client who, this reminds me, like getting denied from a college.
Yeah.
You can make that mean something so big about you, and that can
Yeah.
be this huge stressor, or you can decide, to really not let that shake you. And so that's just like goes to show how like the stories that we believe really can dictate how that stress feels in our body. So stress is really, it's most of it is perceived, at least in this modern day world that we live in. And it is crazy. I went to the dermatologist a couple months ago, and I've been having some issue. I've had this skin thing, a very mild thing for probably 10 plus years at this point. And this last time I went, we followed up on it years later. I go, is this like, does this get worse from stress? And she's like, yeah, but like, I don't tell people that because, we can't control our stress. And I'm like, what? Like,
Yeah.
that's so disempowering. Like,
Yeah.
I just think it's so important to, remind people that you do have power over, your stress levels, and that it's not
Yes.
just this like thing that I think it's an illusion to think that we don't have any control over it. And it's just a very disempowering state to be in.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. I think on the one hand, the thing that she's correct about, we don't have control over the stressors that are just naturally around us on a day-to-day basis, right? And we absolutely 100% have control how we respond and or decide if something is going to cause us stress. So it's something that, we talk about and teach a lot about in yoga is it's the mind that determines if something's good or bad, right? I've been watching myself go through this whole conversation with you every time I watch, literally like float by myself, and I watch myself type you the message about having such discontent with weighing myself. And again, I say this because I never did, and it's causing me so it does sometimes get to the point where it's causing me to feel out of control. Like it gets me to the point where I don't feel like I have the ability to control my stress because it's taking me into some place, but then I have to sit back and ask myself why, right? And a lot of people skip that step. A lot of people, um, the tools are abounding, but yet we don't necessarily know how to use them and apply them to ourselves. So, I'm watching my daughter go through the process very similar to what you were just talking about with getting rejections from colleges. She's applying for a job and she's getting a lot of no's. Like, and it's because it's a tough job market. She has a very specific, it's a very specific job that she's looking for. So it's very going to be very competitive. And, you know, I'm not with her on a daily basis, so I don't know what things that she's doing to help her cope. We can acknowledge that there's the both and here, right? You can go, okay, this is disappointing. Let me let myself feel it, feel my emotions, because one of the things that I've been learning lately is that people don't let themselves cry and people don't let themselves feel the emotions. And I think that's where we then really get, back to your point, unable to process ourselves out of it causing us stress because we're not allowing ourselves to cry, to vent. And there's science behind it. Within the first, oh gosh, I wrote a little paper on this actually a couple years ago for a coaching engagement that I had. It's like within the first 90 minutes of having a situation happen, that's like your sweet spot where you can get on the phone and just like get it out of the system by talking about it, saying whatever you got to say, scream, dance, cry, breathe, and actually viscerally process the stressful situation out of your body. I shared with you that I had a stressful situation come up for me on Mother's Day, and the I made the mistake because it was Mother's Day that I like choked it all in, and I went through my day, and at the end of the day I had a mass implosion about it because I just didn't let myself go through this, and I know better. So it's really interesting. You're right, we do have the ability. It takes a lot for people to get control over their mind. I mean, you know this.
Oh my goodness. This is what sent me when I was dysregulated AF and going through a lot of my issues myself.
Mm-hmm.
I would not process my stuff
Mm-hmm.
and it would all come up at night. And I think I was almost in like a freeze state where I would like distract myself from these emotions. And then I was wondering, I was like, why am I not able to fall asleep? And why is, my mind racing? I'm not
Yeah.
giving myself any space and I'm not helping myself
Yes.
from all this stuff coming at me. And so it was just this really, really bad like cycle. And it was a huge reminder that I have to let myself feel the things because it's
Yeah.
easy to constantly be doing something, to constantly be stimulated, especially nowadays. And like going out for a walk with like no media, not even music, like
Mm-hmm.
doing those things to give yourself space,
Mm-hmm.
I've found to be incredibly important, and also where I get, creative downloads and,
Yes.
all the things. So that's like a whole nother thing that that we could get into. But I want to talk about having sometimes gratitude for stress because
Yeah.
stress can help us perform at a high level. Stress does help us perform at a high level, whether it is like I think of me training at jujitsu and they say, all right, time to roll. And my whole body's like, anxious and
Yeah.
I go into this heightened state and I'm like full out fighting and it's so freaking, fun, but it's hard. And, after that, I'm just wiped. But that right there that's me getting better. And that's me,
Mm-hmm.
going into a different state where I am just executing, at the highest
Yeah.
level. I know
Yeah.
I can't do that at 8 p.m. anymore like I was. And
Yeah.
that was an issue for me. But training hard and like getting yourself in that state is not always a bad thing. And I think that kind of tying it back to how we started is like we see social media, it's either you're in this world, the high intensity, push yourself, hustle world, or you're in the wellness, de-stress, like
Yeah.
everything is like that. But it's like we can have both and we should have both. And that's probably what's going to be ideal for, optimal human health and performance. And not only in like the health and fitness world, but like think about when you do public speaking.
Oh yeah.
Most of us get really stressed before we get a little bit of anxiety, and having a little bit of that is actually really beneficial to kind of get ourselves ready. It's like if we're not, in any way a little bit nervous, like did we really, prepare or I guess is it like actually important to us?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so like knowing that a little bit of stress is usually a good thing and like having gratitude for that. Like, okay, I'm grateful that I'm stressed about this speech I'm giving because it's going to push me to prepare better and to show up and perform at a high level.
Yeah. So I love what you're talking about. And to me, that sounds like excitement. And again, kind of going back to how the body doesn't really know, like, if it's threat from a bear or threat from eating a Reese's peanut butter cup. We don't know the difference between being nervous, anxious, and excited. So I always teach people, particularly before they're getting up to, practice teach and teach in front of me and get evaluated and all the things that cause nerves, right? It's just remind yourself you're super excited. Like that's what it is. It's excitement, right? I always say like I'm nervous all the time when I stand up to teach yoga or get on a podcast with someone. Even coaching sometimes makes me a little like because I'm excited about it. I think anything that's worth like, if you feel that inside, that's a really good feeling to have, and it gets your heart going. My dogs might go nuts here for a second. I hope you can't hear them.
That's okay.
Um, we'll see what happens. Yes, and the stress that I hear you talking about right now is like getting that elevated heart rate, right? Getting your heart rate into that zone that's going to get you like, I kind of did a Peloton ride like that yesterday, and she even used the words, and it's just like, you should feel like your heart is not under, yeah, she said under stress, like but you got it, you got 15 more seconds, right? Like you can make it to the top of this hill. And it's like, we sometimes, I think, don't want to use that type of language because we have this perception that stress is all bad. But you also said something about processing emotions, and again, this conversation is really, really timely, particularly with some of coaching clients that I've had recently, and people starting to become aware of their patterns, right? Like they let stress get to them so much, they know they should go take the walk, but then they revert back to, use the word freeze state, and they take a nap, or they lay on the couch and scroll, or they just mindlessly watch TV, right? That is when I think about the mind conditioning us to hold us safe, because then we get to stay inside the story of, my life is so hard, it is stressful, I don't have time. Whenever I hear people say I don't have time, I'm like, okay, well, you told me you laid down and took a nap for 30 minutes, which maybe you did need to take a nap, because sometimes you really do. But tell me what led up to taking that nap, and why did you choose a nap over a walk? Why did you choose a nap over doing your breath work? Why did you choose a nap for journaling? And you said, let's talk about having gratitude for the stress, because if you start looking at it and going, oh, I'm actually grateful that my body is showing me this right now, because it's teaching me how to break a pattern, or it's also helping me break through to another level of health and fitness, right? Whatever it is. In one of the courses that I created, there's 3 guiding prompts: I am, I deserve, and I'm grateful. And I always tell the ladies, don't just be grateful for the easy things, be grateful for the hard things too, because usually it's the things that are challenges in our life that came with maybe a certain amount of really hard work, where they may have been stressful momentary circumstances. Those are the things that are going to push you forward and get you forward faster. And it's not that we shouldn't have great gratitude for the things that are, like my home and my animals and my husband. Yeah, of course. And I'm also grateful. Like I said this to someone the other day, like, I'm, as hard as the past 4 years was, I'm so grateful that I went through that experience, because I know so much about my body now.
Yep.
So much. And it led me down a whole new path of health and wellness, and just a new level of determination and belief in myself, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Really.
And would you say also like awareness and like maybe like understanding that's
Yeah.
helping with coaching?
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
Yes.
'Cause I feel the
Yes.
same way. Like I'm like, okay, I went through a lot of shit, but
Yeah.
I'm still growing, of course, but
Yeah.
it makes me a better coach. And one more
Yeah.
thing, I want to come back to training and talking
Yeah.
about stressful training. Because really, the way that we're going to adapt and grow and really signal to our bodies saying, hey, we need to get better. Hey, you need to put on some muscle. Like the way that we do that is we send a signal to where your body's like, okay, there's no other option. Like we got to like improve, or else, we're not going to be able to survive this. So
Yeah.
it is a stressful stimulus that we're needing to apply to really see great progress and great results, whether it be bodybuilding style training, whether you're powerlifting, whether you're doing jiu-jitsu, general fitness, whatever it is.
Yeah.
But on this note, like caveating that if you are in a very, dysregulated state, or if you
Mhm.
are, if you've gotten to a place where you are overtraining, where any of my, anyone who's gotten obsessed with fitness in the gym has maybe gotten to this point where you're overdoing it. And I've actually recently kind of realized I was overtraining a little bit, is we start to have diminishing returns for what we're doing. And we actually start to not progress. We think, oh, the answer is more, harder, harder, go, you know, get stronger, keep going. But sometimes literally taking a step back, letting our body actually recover, we're going to see way better results, way better progress. So, making sure that, you take this message as, make sure you train hard, but also don't overdo it. Do the right amount for you. Because sometimes you can even like start losing muscle mass when you are overdoing it in these different ways. So making sure fitting you and where you're at is key. And something you said was like not kind of like identifying yourself as I'm stressed or I'm anxious. This is so key, I feel. And I think that it's not common for people to like separate themselves from it. We make it,
Mhm.
oh, it's about us. Whereas like reframing it, just like you said, of, okay, I'm feeling this way. I'm not like gonna identify that, oh, I have this, but rather, okay, I'm feeling this way. And this goes into what I wanted to touch on is your mindset about stress. In
Mhm.
my health mindset coaching certification that I went through, working with a psychologist, she talked about it's kind of a spectrum that you can look at your stress on as either debilitating on one end or enhancing.
Mm, mhm.
The mindset that you have about this stress can change a lot about, it's how you're perceiving it and then therefore how you're able to perform. So like the public speaking example, I think is a really good one, is like, are you going to let this anxiousness totally like debilitate you? You're going to cancel? Does this mean that you shouldn't do it, that you're going to screw up? Or does this mean, okay, I'm feeling this way, I'm going to prepare a little bit extra. This is going to help me, perform at a high level, being in this like heightened state and, taking a little bit of that, using this mindset shift. It's really cool. Like, I mean, the power of our mind, and how we can choose how to, perceive things.
Yeah, it's the yoga philosophy really teaches us, and again, I keep talking about this a lot because of what I've been teaching people for 20 some odd years, is we are not the body. We are not our title. We are not our position in this world. We are something bigger than this, right? So the moment we attach to it, then that's when we give it meaning, right? So and don't get me wrong, like that's how we make sense of life, is we make meaning of relationships and our energetic exchange with money, and how we present ourselves, and all these things are really amazing. And the moment, you know I said this a lot when I was going through my health journey for the past couple of years, is that I was like, "Well, I'm not sick. I'm still here. I'm still doing," because I was still showing up and doing the things, right? And I kind of it was like really, and again, it's nuanced because I slip sometimes. I'll just be like, "Oh, I was so sick," right? Because I'm just like talking, but I didn't identify with my all of these different diagnoses that I had. And back to what we talked about before, yes, I would have my days and my moments and my periods of time where I had great sadness, and I would cry and let it out and process through, because the only way to sustain and maintain that type of mindset shift is to also then allow yourself to move through the emotions, to process out the stress, to get back to that parasympathetic nervous system, which is not easy. Because if you're talking, you know, people become kind of over enchanted with like working out a lot and doing all the things. Well, on the other side of the spectrum, people can overdo meditation, overdo breath work, we can overdo everything on both sides of this conversation. And I think it becomes really hard. Even, I mean, I don't know about you, but I will even say for myself, even knowing everything that I know, I still go up and down and ride the waves, right? So it's definitely it's a practice, and you have to want it. Like you really have to want to make the change.
Yeah, and like I love that because like it's a reminder, like all of us are human. Me and Marcia, we
Mhm.
go through our shit. We've got,
Yeah.
the ups and the downs, and we're also coaches. We're also helping, humans navigate their stuff. And kind of what you're talking on is something called, have you ever heard the term metacognition?
Mhm. Yeah.
I love talking about this because it's like basically you observing yourself and like you being able to observe your thoughts and thinking of kind of like yourself as like a dog walker, and like your brain, your thoughts are like the dog on the leash who they can run wild, but you can also control them. And this is so helpful for me. And I use this all the time, like every day probably, where I go, okay, what thoughts are coming up for me? What feelings are coming up for me? And what am I going to choose this means?
Mhm.
What mindset, what belief is going to serve me the best here that's, in alignment with who I want to be. And simply like taking yourself away from yourself and like viewing that, I think can be so helpful in managing and like navigating these different situations, because it's when, just like you're saying, like when we identify as, maybe like our thoughts like so closely, like any thought that pops in our brain, that's us. But like when in
Yeah.
reality, thoughts are just thoughts, and we can observe them and we can
Yeah.
choose. That's like, I'll have sometimes like random thought where I'm like, what? No, like that's not me.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think we all have those. And so,
Yeah.
uh, yeah.
This is, kind of where we started this conversation, and we were talking about, I mean, in specific, we were using 75 hard as the example. And yet we could probably insert any program that is super, super structured and wants people to do things in a very specific way. What you're talking about, what I watch happen all the time, is people so badly just want someone outside of themselves to tell them what it should look like, how to do it, and how they should be feeling it. And the moment they have someone standing in front of them, like a me or you, going, no, well, you tell me, observe yourself in this. Because the structured programs, the prescriptions are so popular, that right there is why people are having a hard time regulating their nervous systems. That right there is why people are having a hard time getting themselves out of chronic stress states, is because we are, I'm not going to say everybody, because that's unfair, because clearly I have plenty of people sitting in front of me all the time, practicing yoga, taking trainings with me, and working with me and coaching. You have plenty of people who show up to do work with you, but it takes a certain type of discipline to go, oh, I have to be my own, what's the word? I have to be my own guide. Like, Anna's not going to tell me exactly how to do this. Marcia's not going to tell me exactly how this needs to feel. We so want that though. It's like we've been all conditioned that we have a hard time floating above ourselves and watching. And again, listening to you say that, I was like, yep, this is what I say it in yoga all the time. Imagine you're about, close your eyes and see yourself practicing triangle. And then let my words pass through you, right? Like, and then whatever words hit your body and go, oh, actually, I actually have to press my foot into the floor more. Or, oh, okay, it's not a big deal that my weight isn't changing right now because that's not the most important thing. But I've attached meaning to it because you see so many people being like, oh, I did this and in like 5 weeks I lost 30 pounds. And so you're like, well, how come mine isn't? Blah, blah, blah. Right. But this is what happens. And we have to be continually almost like mindset coaching ourselves all the time. And sometimes that's exhausting.
It,
I joke with people all the time. I'm like, I have a lot of self-awareness and sometimes it's really exhausting because I'm always, and then sometimes you do just need to shut that off and be like, you know what? It is what I just have to be. And we are human, right? So sometimes you do just have to shut it off. But really, the wisdom for all of us is in our body. It's not even in our mind. I mean, that's just the truth. But the mind wants to be in so much control.
oh
And
my,
that's why we don't take the public speaking gig. That's why we don't, that's why we lay down and take the nap instead of going for the walk. Because it's just like, oh, well, this is comfortable. Go do this over here again.
yes, I could talk, I could go into all the ways that I've like my control or brain and, all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. Something that I learned from a mentor, it's kind of, I think what you're describing, I love so much is go 20% outward and 80% inward.
Inward. Yeah.
And when I learned that, I was like, that's so key for not just, thinking about like your health, that's crucial, but also business for fellow business owners is like, where are you outsourcing all of your ideas and like how to do everything to like what everyone else is doing or what your
Mhm.
mentor is teaching you? Like take all of that, take all this input and then use your own discernment. What feels right for you and what ideas do you have? Like what's making you different, right? Like
Yeah.
that. I mean, at the end of the day, when talking about like being a business owner, like, I'm sure most of us are here to not just like copy paste, but we're here to like change the game, like do it our own way and hope that that really resonates with people. And so, yeah, like exactly, like coming back to your inner wisdom, game changing.
Game changing. You know, I just want to share this recent experience. So I worked with a GI psychiatrist for, well, I really only needed to work with her for like 2 months. So one of the things that honestly all my doctors were like, you're getting through this so well because I have all these tools and I knew when to use them and how to apply them. So what we're talking about right now can really serve you in the long run. It's almost like you're preparing yourself for everything by implementing these strategies and these tools and these things that we're talking about right through this very delicious long conversation that we're having. But I now know how what my body feels like when it's in stress. And I had a situation pop up on Mother's Day and it was very, very upsetting to me emotionally. Like it's hurtful. I'm not going to lie. If I told anybody what it is, you all would be like, yep, I can see how that's very hurtful, right? And I'm a human, right? So I'm going to process the emotion and I'm going to let myself move through it. As I mentioned earlier, the mistake I made was I held it in like all day because I was trying, my family was doing all these things for me for Mother's Day and I was trying to have a nice time and I was like having such a hard time letting myself enjoy myself. And I could actually feel it physically in my body, like I was holding on to it. And then I finally allowed myself to process through it. And as the days have been moving from that, like I still have this residual, like kind of tightness in my stomach area, just this like little like tightness. And as I was out for my walk today, I was like, what is like at first I was like, oh, what is this? What is going on? And then I was like, oh, this is just the rest of that. And honestly, the moment I connected and I understood what I was feeling was just the rest of something that I had just experienced, I was able to take some deep, deep breaths. And it's like all of a sudden I started to feel better. So why pay attention to the good stress in the body. I mean, that was stress that was trying to alert me, like, hey, you held on to something, like, let's get it out, like, let's move it out the door. If you're not paying attention to these things, or if you're not training yourself to feel that rush and that energy in your body, getting your adrenaline, you're not going to be able to know when it's out of balance because you're just going to be chronically living in it. I had a woman, a friend of mine, well, I'm going to call her an acquaintance of mine. When she was in my life, she was in a really terrible relationship with her husband. Terrible. And everyone saw it and we all knew it. And she had just like crazy eczema all over both of just her elbows. And she was like, would try all sorts of creams and go to the dermatologist and food. And I was like, stress, stress. But you can't say that to someone, right? It's really hard to be like, well, you're stressed out because of your relationship with your husband. Well, long story short, I caught up with her a couple months ago. She has since left her husband a year ago. And she said the moment she made the decision to leave her husband, within a month, her elbows cleared up. So our body is always trying to tell us something. And we gotta listen. We gotta listen. And there's chronic stress and then there's just acute stress, right? And having the tools and techniques and people, I would also say a key thing, and we haven't really talked about this, but is having the right people around you, not people who are just gonna, I mean, I kind of just said it. I kind of facilitated that role for my friend. I didn't quite look at her ever and say, it's because your husband's nasty. I mean, maybe I did, but I can't go back in time and really remember. I have a tendency to say what I think. So I'm sure I probably said something, but it probably didn't click, right? It wasn't like, oh, this is actually the reason, or she wasn't ready to hear it. She wasn't ready to process and do the thing that she needed to do. But for me, having women by my side, because they support me so much, they're just going to tell me like it is. I think that's a huge important thing for us to have in our life.
Yeah.
Truly, to help us along the way. Call us out on our bullshit.
Yeah, absolutely. Like,
I mean, sometimes it's easier to have a neutral party, like a coach, a trainer, whatever, because then there's not the emotional attachment to that person. But, I have some really great women in my corner who let me know how it is when they need to let me know how it is. And I do the same for them, for sure.
yeah, I've heard multiple stories very recently about the relationship thing and how
Hmm.
when someone breaks up or, leaves a partner that is not good for them, like you can lose like freaking, you can drop like 10
10
pounds
pounds.
quickly.
Well, your body goes into protection mode. And what would we do? Think about it. Like, think about caveman era. What would we do? We'd get all, like we gain weight and like literally have a protective layer around us. Like, so that's what our bodies do when there's a threat.
Yeah. Yeah. And like personally, when I met my current boyfriend, this was like in coinciding with my healing journey, and there was a lot of other factors as well, but I also, really contribute him to being a big part of my healing journey and
Really? Oh,
feeling safe. And it was a really like cool thing just to see like, the impact of that. But I'm curious to know, like, what would you say to the person who they maybe have gone a lot of their life not knowing like how to even feel their emotions, how to tune into themselves? Like, where does someone maybe start in maybe a very like tangible way? And then like, what kind of advice do you have for them?
yeah. Ooh, that's a really good question. Well, first of all, I know hands down, the first thing that I would tell someone to do is breathe, is to lay down and practice diaphragmatic breathing. And I'll tell you why. Every time, hmm, every time you were at Storytellers, yes. Every time we get women breathing, immediately tears starts flowing down their face. This is actually something that I need to look up and get this right, because I talk about it too much, but there's a high percentage of the time that most of us walk around holding our breath. We don't use the fullness of our breath, or we're shallow breathers. And exercising our diaphragm is truly one of the most important things that we can do in our body. Our diaphragm is connected to our psoas. Our psoas is a deep core muscle that connects the hip to the thoracic, our rib cage in the back, which connects into QL. And all of these deep, deep muscles have a lot of emotion tied to them. We all have tight backs, tight hips, all these things. So the moment you start to breathe and really let yourself, like your belly, rise and fall, it can start to just naturally move things around for you. And I always say, don't worry about identifying it, just let it come. Right? So I would say breathe. I know that you have, as part of your group, breath coach. And I am a certified breath coach as well. I don't know. I just needed like 20 certifications, and I have them all. But breathing, just getting people to breathe, is really like a huge obstacle.
Mm-hmm.
It's a huge obstacle, and then I even think about like how you want us to breathe while we're lifting weights, and then how I want people to breathe when they're on the yoga mat, how the Pilates instructor, and we don't even know how to just breathe. But then we have to breathe in all these different formats when we go to these different, and they all have different ways of breathing on purpose. They're different disciplines. So I would say find space to breathe and get your diaphragm moving. And if you don't know anything about your diaphragm, Google it, learn all about your diaphragm. It's a fascinating, very important muscle. Because if it's not working, and if your breath is moving, then you're helping move lymph through your body. If your breath is moving, you're helping your digestive system. And if your digestive system's working, then your mind is able to function. Your breath feeds your brain, like it oxygenates your blood. Like there's so many just very simple things, but it will start to release some emotion. We hold it all. It's our respiratory system is our heart, and our heart is where we have like love and then heartache and all. People who have heart issues have lost joy in their life. So I say breathe. That would be my first piece of advice. And then what was the second part of your question?
It just kind of like, where to start, and
Where to
then
start?
really like just listening into yourself, and
Yeah.
like the other expansive tools you have with that.
I would say the next easiest thing to do, and you already said it, and so I'm just going to leverage it because I think it's an easy tool. Go outside and take a walk without anything. Allow yourself to literally just walk and not worry about listening to an iPod. Like you don't have to stack your habits, right? You don't have to listen to a podcast. You don't have to listen to music. You don't have to take notes and voice memos. Just go walk and give your brain the ability to turn off so that it can actually turn back on. The thing that you said, and again, this could be like a whole other podcast, is talking about, getting the theta and delta waves of your brain stimulated, because that's where our creative ideas come from, like really great problem solving. So if things feel heavy, if you feel overwhelmed, I'd say take a couple of moments and take some deep breaths, and then get outside and walk with nothing. Even if it's 5 minutes, just do it. Those would be the two easiest places, I think, to start.
Yeah. And everyone, I want you to really, really let that, hit and like sink in. Cause I think sometimes we hear these things of, oh, like go take a walk, or, oh, go breathe. And it's like, okay, whatever. But actually these things are so powerful and can
Yeah.
change your life. And I'm
Oh, Yeah.
I want to share with everyone an app that I really love for myself. And recently I had a client start using it. I recommended it to her as just like a daily thing that we start. And every week she's telling me, she's like, Anna, I am using this every day. I love it. I feel like I have a new tool in my toolbox to use like when I'm stressed. So the app is called Breath Work without the O. And it's not, like a very like deep immersive breathwork session, but it's literally like a
Hmm.
1 minute thing that guides you through, a couple minutes, 1 minute. I used to do just the 1 minute like every morning, and it just makes you take these really long, deep inhales and exhales. And just simply having a mindfulness practice like that can be really helpful. It doesn't have to be you
Yeah.
start whole, the long meditations and the breath work. It's like start, small.
Actually, and I think I said it in the first part, we have to be careful about jumping into meditation or doing things like ice bath. I know they're all the rage right now, but please, 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 please. When we have a dysregulated nervous system, when we have free states, when we have a racing mind, the last thing we want to do is to try to like do things that are going to like shock it, because you will just go back into that freeze mode because your body doesn't quite know how to regulate what that stress of the ice bath. Or with meditation, it will just, you don't want to control it too much. You just breathe. Just start by breathing. And yeah, and I love that. Any tools that you can, even if you just, I have, once it becomes a habit, what you're going to find happens is you might have an interaction that is challenging, and then all of a sudden you find yourself taking a deep breath in. You might just find yourself naturally doing it. I love that you're bringing this up, and I say this often because I've been teaching and practicing yoga and immersed in this world for 22 years. So I oftentimes just take it for granted that everybody just knows to do it. And I forget, and I feel really fortunate that this has been my life actually, because I have it. And even having it, it's still very challenging. So thank you for bringing that back up.
Yeah. I think this was a freaking cool conversation. Is there anything else that you want to leave our listeners with today? Any gems, and then also how they can find you?
Mm. The other thing that I would just add is remember something, please, please, please. Without your health, it doesn't matter. So, without your health, it doesn't matter. So, prioritizing everything over you, it doesn't matter. That Put that into practice before you have a health or some kind of crisis so that you're already practicing it. So, should that health thing happen, should something happen, you already know how to take care of yourself through it. That would be my biggest thing. Without your health, it doesn't matter. It's number one thing in business, in relationships, everything. Health, number one. That's what I teach business owners all the time. You got to take care of your health first. So, where can you find me? Well, I learned in March that I'm the most brilliant marketer out there. I say that laughingly, jokingly, but I am literally Marcia Hoffheins everywhere. I mean, it's switched up to Marcia Lynn Hoffheins on Instagram and Facebook, which is a really long, funny story. And I'm not going to get into it right now, but still, if you just typed in Marcia Hoffheins, Marcia, and then Hoffheins, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook. That's also my website. And that's also my email address at gmail.com. So I'm super simple to find if you want to find me.
Love it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Marcia. This was so amazing. And I think that people are going to get a ton of value from this, whether you are needing to heal something, small right now, or just kind of reprioritize your self-care, your stress management, or, whether you feel like you're on this journey of needing to, make some big changes. We really hope that this episode gave you
Yes.
some great tools, and definitely reach out if anyone, has feedback or questions. And yeah, and again, thanks, Marcia, and I
Thanks
will
for having me.
talk to you soon.